Welcome to the Starting Over podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is a show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. It's an interesting Sunday, and I am recording a little bit earlier in the week than I normally do, just for the pure fact of I had this thought rolling in my head for the show, and I was like, let me go do it while I still have the thought for the show. So that's why it's so early in the week. Anyway, it's a bit cold, but it's not like super cold outside. I don't need a throw here while I am recording, which is quite nice. I wish I had like a sweater maybe. Yeah, it's probably about sweater temperature, even though they said it's supposed to drop down to like 18 degrees outside this evening, and it was probably like 60 this afternoon. So anyway, it's been weird. So climate change, period. If you notice, just for the record, have you noticed that a whole lot of like environmental stuff has stopped saying like just global warming? They just say climate change now. And I do find that interesting. It's like global warming is like the subtext, but it's more like climate change due to human effects. So I do find that interesting because it's not just getting hot; it's getting crazy cold too. So yeah. Anyway, sort of going back to the purpose of the show. Today we're going to talk about the benefits of casual play and how it applies to hardcore tournaments. And you're going to hear some thoughts here in this podcast. And I want you to understand, these aren't rock slams. They're really not. And I'm not saying blah, 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 people can't compete at rock, or blah, 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 people suck. Or it's nothing along that line. So let's not even go there. And it's not even a commentary about rock. So it's just about hardcore tournaments. Okay. And I will admit that rock will be brought up. So just have that be clarified. But the main thing that I've learned recently is casual play has a positive benefit because it gives you exposure, it gives you time to test things out when there's nothing on the line. And more importantly, it allows you to gain experience that you can just file away into your brain as like, oh yeah, I know what that can do. I saw that before, I'm okay. Or I saw that before and that can be deadly. Now I know a lot of people would say like, but hey, Dark Logos, big tournaments, everyone plays the cheesy pieces. Not all the time. Not really all the time. And you will find some weird anomalies here and there, and having some sort of casual diversity is good. So here's how I'm going to break things down today. I'm going to talk about first the effect of casual play. Then we're going to transition into how you can use casual play for your benefit in getting ready for a tournament. And last but not least, how you can take some of your experiments from casual play and turn them into meta monsters. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to say this, and many of you already know, this podcast does not target casual players. The main reason is I do way too much technical talk for a casual player to really either enjoy most of the time or sit and stomach pretty much the conclusions that I draw, because I make a whole lot of things unfun for casual play. Even this week, it was a semi-casual game, and it said prizes unknown. So I'm thinking maybe I might score something awesome. So I brought a team, which is casual for me, which I made in the last minute, which for me the last minute is an hour and a half. And then I went out toward the venue, but I also had some other errands to run. But pretty much there was make team, do errands, go to venue. So there wasn't any time to like do something else. So I made the team. I thought it was casual. I brought out Beta Ray Bill. And if anyone wants to timestamp, like look at when the show comes out and look at my profile on HC Realms of the thread I started about Beta Ray Bill. And then you'll see the shenanigans that sort of came about. But with Beta Ray Bill, the big reality that I dealt with was I bring him out almost like once a year because he is scary. And then I put in some other elements that I really haven't played that much. And then what was created was this grand monster. And it made me realize several elements with Beta Ray Bill might actually be meta now, even though he'll be retired for Gen Con. So it's not Gen Con viable. So there's some things that make me sit back and think like, hey, this is some things I can do during AVX. This is some things I possibly may be able to do in a couple of future tournaments. And I better keep this in the back of my head. And so that's a big thing. It's casual play allows you to bring out some of these things that you were somewhat fiddling with, but you didn't know quite how it would turn out. Or better yet, if certain components that you like, if they would interact with another component that you're sort of learning, and if that would turn out well. The issue with casual play that I feel that when it comes down to high level play, that is a problem, and definitely for our community, since we are having more high level tournaments, or let me rephrase that, tournaments that require a higher skill level to perform well, is that there are several things in casual play that are horrible to prepare you mentally for this transition. And let me try to make this analogy as best I can without it being insulting, because my whole Golden City thing went really well. Imagine a Rottweiler, and the Rottweiler is taken care of and he's kept at home. The Rottweiler will bark and maybe bite some strangers, but the Rottweiler in that home environment is more than enough to be a defensive tool and companion. Okay? Now, I take said Rottweiler and I put him inside of a nature preserve. Okay? And on that nature preserve, there are lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. There are plants and flora that he hasn't interacted with. And there's prey that the Rottweiler could kill on that plant, on that area of land. But that sort of prey is used to running around and is used to big threats. Will that dog survive? Possibly. But most likely, what will happen is that dog will become prey. Pure and simple. That dog might be vicious, that dog might bite, but in comparison to the other dogs, it doesn't have, or let me rephrase that, not the other dogs, the other predators, it is not on the top of the food chain. So what does this have to do with anything? This is what House Rules does to a community that wants to eventually go into a competitive environment. House Rules creates dogs, not lions, not tigers, not bears, no oh my's. And I know some of you might find that insulting, and you might say, like, well, Hair 10 is awesome, and the Hair 10 has never won a tournament. So-and-so is awesome. What major tournaments have they been winning consistently? Who are they competing against? Where are they at on the national stage? And I'm not even going to say like, oh, I'm awesome. I'm Dark Logos. I got second place at a rock. My victory means absolutely nothing. Really, let me rephrase that. My placement means absolutely nothing. And I really want people to understand that. But in reality, when we look at competition, it's not really, hey, I played my Batman theme team and I got into the top 16 based on my Batman theme team. And then I changed it up to Justice League because I wanted to turn up the power level a little bit. You don't see that. Playing with house rules doesn't prepare you for the beasts that are out there and around. Does that mean that every tournament needs to be rock'em sock'em robots where someone's head has to be knocked off for there to be fun? No, and I'm not promoting that, and I'm not saying that at all. I had Roni KJS on here to prove otherwise. But I am saying is this. If you have aspirations of going up a level, if you have any sort of desire of seeing not the mountaintop, but probably like midway up the mountain, house rules will hurt you. And house rules hurt you more than you think, because house rules warps your mind into automatically discounting certain categories. Okay? But you're going to say, hey, Dark Logos, you're really just going into the effects of playing, casual. What's so big deal about the house rules? I thought casual play is supposed to be beneficial. And it can be. And it can be. And there are certain times in testing figures out that house rules bring out this creativeness that, it's like, oh, I've never thought about putting these two things together. At the same time, just because you put those two things together does not mean that they're S-class. and if they're not S-class, then you're having some problems. You can have some A-plus class meta in a competitive tournament. And if you bring some B-class, thank you for playing, you just fed, the person that you played against. Unless God really favors your dice. Okay? So the main thing that I want you to understand is if you are in those situations, use those situations as lab days as best you can and game your local meta as best you can to keep it healthy. Over poaching doesn't do anything, doesn't do anyone any good. But at the same time, if you feel that you want to go to a rock, you want to go to a Gen Con, you want to go to an Origin, you will need to separate yourself from among them and do serious games against serious competitors and play stronger teams. Just the honest truth. And I know that's something that might seem inconvenient, but if you make friends on the realms, you can. I will not lie. It is real easy to do a phone game, let alone a Skype game. It is super easy. And because the board is gridded and we have letters and numbers, you just say like blah, blah, blah to that square, running shot. That's it. It's real simple. So, I think we're at a point where technologically our community is in the Stone Age when it comes to how we can use technology to actually have fun. And I think HCO, while I do give out codes, I think HCO is a little bit stupid because I can play a Skype game. And that's why I don't play HCO, is that if I want to play really strong players with my collection, I can call people and play a game. I don't need to go online and play a game. And I think a lot of other people realize that. Heck, I can play by the post and still have a really strong game and not pay. But I digress. So the casual environment in it of itself is good because it forces creativity and it forces us to think. And it forces us to think in new and exciting ways. At the same time, if we have house rules limit that creativity so that in the end, we might create things that are deadly for that house rules environment, but doesn't do good when you're dealing with people without that sort of restraint. They are bred killers in a unrestrained environment. They are in a state of nature. Literally. They're in a state of nature. And depending on the level of predators and the number of predators that are in that nature preserve, there's certain beasts that walk out and certain prey that lies dead on the ground. So that's just something to be considered. And then even more so, I'll take a story from way back in the day, all the way back to Brave and the Bold. I was in Chicago, and I think this is the first time I met Ignis Mouse. I actually met him in person before I actually talked to him online a couple of times. But I met him in person, and I think this is even before I did the show. Yeah, I think this is even before I started the show. And I went to a venue which pretty much probably was at the time, I guess, was a pretty good venue. It had a lot of competition. Had about 30 people. People had Metrons and we would say it was a Fast Forces, but it's technically a starter thing, and they would run a Metron thing and all this other stuff. And they had a whole lot of hardcore people there. And I sort of was like, oh, wow, ooh, these hardcore people. Ooh, wow, okay. So I go and play at the venue. And the first round, I beat a new player. The second round, I went against a guy that thought that you could hypersonic speed and close combat expert. And the third round, I sort of one-sided Hulk smashed this young woman, which it's not to say, ooh, girls suck, but her team was made by her boyfriend. In the end, I got third place because I didn't go full out beast mode on the first guy because he was a new player and I was teaching him how to play. That was a big tournament. That tournament had like 25 people, somewhere around there, and I got third place. And you could say, hey, Dark Logos, you got third place. That is awesome. But that was a super hardcore meta. And I played against people that were in that meta, and even in that meta there was prey. Just being honest. And so even though the full shackles were off and feats were allowed, and I was playing a full feated up Oreo chaired Martian Manhunter, and for anyone that would understand the feats that you can put on Oreo chaired Martian Manhunter, you would know how annoyingly frustrating that could be. Definitely with camouflage. Anyway, but with that, I was able to get really high, note my third match, and not have too many problems. So just because you have an unrestricted format doesn't mean automatically like, we're the jungle, we are the lions and tigers. No, you might actually be like a gopher. Or, maybe an armadillo. Tough to kill, but still prey. So don't think just because you're in that, like, oh yeah, I'm the best. Because I'll be honest, from the way it went, I didn't fight Ken, and I didn't fight another guy that was probably one of the better people at that venue. So, I said Ken, Ignis Mouse. But with that being said, so what did I avoid? I avoided a lion, and I avoided the velociraptor. Does that mean automatically that I'm a hunter? No. It just means that I'm an omnivore. That's it. So, again, I know it's a little bit of rambling and a little bit too much story time. But I want people to understand that just because you are in that open environment doesn't necessarily make your environment better. It makes it better for testing, and it makes it better for sharpening your teeth and becoming better. But if all you're playing is like average to mediocre people, it doesn't matter if your format is house rules or if your format is all open. You're not going to get better. Just period. Let me rephrase that. You are not going to get to a level of trying that you'll be able to win a tournament, a major tournament. Just not. game's not in that state anymore. Like maybe if you were in Infinity Challenge days and Hyper Time days, maybe, but we're not in those days anymore. We have too much technology now. Okay, the next thing that we're mainly looking at is how to extrapolate the information that we get from the casual days, and how does this benefit us in formulating things that are proper for the meta. Okay, the main thing that I like to say is when you go into this casual game and you're playing, you get that shorthand, and that's the experience of fighting that figure. Because again, we don't have time to memorize all the dials outside of our own dials. We memorize our own dials of what we're playing, and we try to get a general idea of what our opponent has. And if anybody wants to know, look at the cheat sheet. Is your opponent's card, and on that card, it will list the powers that your opponent will get in the order in which they will get them. Okay? So if they have a special power, a standard power, and then toughness, okay, then it's going to appear in that order. Okay, the special power, the ordinary power, and toughness. Bam, there we go. I know what he's going to have for most of his clicks. Okay, so that's your first cheat sheet. So I don't need to memorize how many clicks of impervious he has. I just need to know he has it. Okay, I don't need to memorize how many clicks of special power he has. I already know he has it. Okay, so if there's no other special power on damage, but you know his special power, and there's no other powers on damage but his special power, then guess what? Once he loses his special power, he probably doesn't have it anymore. So those are like some shorthand things, but the biggest thing that we're extrapolating is how did that figure play? Next thing is, what did it do? What did it actually do? We can say like, oh, my team did this, that, and the other. That's great. You already know what your team is going to do. I've already covered about examining your team and making your notes inside of your heroclix notebook. Go back, if you want to hit this one on pause, open up another window in YouTube. Go back and somewhere in the 70s that I talk about, you know, becoming a better player and looking at making your teams better. Okay, so you can hit that on pause, come back to me in 2 days, you know, if you want to. Okay, so for all those people that are going to do that, here's your transition music. Okay, for all you that are still here, or those that have joined us back from listening to the old podcast, you need to see what your opponent does to try to say, okay, this is creative, this premise is creative, this premise no one's looking for, this premise is killer. And so you sort of shift it down out of the figure. You start cutting away the figure. And this is the part where a lot of people start saying like, oh, why am I cutting away the figure? Because you really need to boil the figure into this magical pot called your mind. And then in this magical pot, you need to season how much of this is luck, and then you need to season how much is this in my play style, and the last season is, does this actually affect anything? Those 3 magical seasonings is Edward Shelton's 3 herbs and spices. Okay? And I make delicious chicken with it. Okay? So you add your 3 herbs and spices to that pot, and then what you'll find out is that the fat comes to the top, because you start to realize that guy played Zoom, and Zoom has hypersonic speed and flurry, and he had 5 perplexers. Well, okay, so this might not be Zoom. This might actually be flurry and 5 perplexers. If I say 5 protected. So you can like skim that fat off. So the fat is probably just Zoom. So it's like, okay, boom. All right, that's gone. Okay, let's look at this. All right, so I got 5 perplexers. Is that good? Nope, that cost him 300 points out of a 500-point game. Oh, gosh, no. cut that out. All right. So we start looking a little bit more like, okay, what did he do with those 5 perplexers? Okay, he perplexed up the attack once and damage and then defense. And then when it was off turns, it was defense and then perplexing down opponent's attacks. Okay, so it was really just stat mod. So I really just need to look at a way of creating high mobility and then creating high damage with decent attack. So we skimmed some more fat, and then we're like, okay, so all boiled down, I need to find these things, and then wonderfully at the bottom of the pot is this wonderful turducken. And for those who are familiar with Madden, know about turduckens. If not, go look it up. Anyway, so down in the bottom is this turducken that forms, and you're like, oh my gosh, this tastes delicious. And then you're like, hey, I get it. I don't need Zoom. I need to play Ghost Rider with the utility belt with TK and Batmite. Bam! All right, there we go. Problem solved. Okay, so all of a sudden you might say, well, isn't that a stretch all the way from, Batmite and Ghost Rider, from Zoom? But really, look, it's pretty much fundamentally the same thing before the belt got nerfed. It's high mobility, flurry, stat modification. What is Ghost Rider and Batmite? High in the belt, high mobility, stat modification. It's the exact same thing. So look at your opponent's piece and then do a song and dance and say, this piece is awesome because it was so inconvenient for me to fight. What you really just need to do is like, okay, what are the fundamentals of this piece and can it be replicated? Is it replicated? And then you just go on from there. There are some figures like Icicle who have a power that just hasn't been replicated with Copsicle. I really wish it was. I so wish it was. But in our current meta, it would be a little bit OP to just put up barrier and like get auto end cap. That would be a little bit too strong. But as you can sort of see, is that, just getting end cap off of that would be very, very powerful. But we had something sort of close with, was it 10th anniversary Green Lantern Hal? He puts up barrier and he attacks through it. So those are, we start extrapolating ideas from one point to the other. Then the next thing that we're looking at is the total team synergy. Because we can say when we put that team into our magical pot again and we start seasoning our 3 herbs and spices, we might understand that, man, this does absolutely nothing for this meta outside of this scenario. And so it's like, ooh, okay, so we just skim some fat off. It's like, okay, ooh, but these 2 components of Super Medic and Hyper Barrier, putting 15 squares of barrier up every turn, was very effective. Okay, how can I make this viable? Okay, well, 15 barrier might not be doable all the time, but Bunker makes permanent barrier. Okay, and then maybe I can get a good medic. How about Bruce Wayne? Oh, okay, that would be a prime. All right. I can roll with him, and I can't play Brother Voodoo, but that's okay. And I get an outwit with Bruce Wayne, and he's a super medic. All right, good. Problem sort of solved, but I've boiled down to the general nitty-gritty of like, all right, let me replicate this. This is how I replicate this. This is how I move forward, okay? So your opponent's team can look awesome in the scenario, but you also, like I said, keep it realistic. Keep it 100 in your head. Will this affect the meta? And will it change anything? Am I going to actually grow and be threatening from using any part of his team and applying it in any way or fashion? Okay. So now we can transition to how do I make something from casual play and I turn it into a meta monster that I can take into high level competition. Okay. the first thing that you have to keep in mind is, remember, our 3 herbs and spices allows us to cut away the fat so that we can get to the meat. And the meat many times is concepts and very rarely pieces. Okay? Just state that again. Many times meat is concepts, very rarely pieces. All right? I'll give out a minor trade secret. Okay? And listen up close. When I talk meta with people, very rarely is it about pieces. It is about function. Pieces just a shorthand, but it's really about function. If I ignore function and start talking about pieces, the conversation easily hits a glass ceiling. You can see that the floors keep going up, but you're limited because you keep touching on this invisible barrier, which is your attachment to this piece. Okay? So, for example, for a while, I believed that M10 Iron Man was at the pinnacle of the meta, right when he came out. And I held on to this belief. Then I started to see like, oh, there's some problems here. But I kept holding on to that like, this dude is tough. Then Team Bases came out. And I was like, he's trash. Don't need him. Okay? Team Bases and other things got nerfed. M10 Iron Man comes out back again like, oh, he's boss. Everybody's going to run Book of the Skull. Everybody's going to run this, that, and the other. He shuts all that stuff down. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Then I'm like, well, here's the power plant. I don't really care about that. That sucks. M10 Iron Man shuts it down because the resource is assigned to the whole team. Then lo and behold, I learned how the power plant gets around M10 Iron Man. And then I realized that when I'm talking function, that I've ignored a lot of elements about M10 Iron Man. That he is bound by damage. He's not bound by effects. He's bound by damage. He says, if my opponent does direct damage in a attack form from me to you, me as M10 Iron Man, I get to ignore damage and possibly at worst take 1 damage. Okay? Now, if you take that step away, it's like, hey, guess what? I got effects that I could just force blast your happy butt into a wall all day, and you can't do anything about it but take 2 penetrating damage over and over and over again. Then, all of a sudden, M10 Iron Man isn't good because what? His primary function has proven to have a weakness. And I mean, that's one of the main reasons I brought it up the other week. It's that M10 Iron Man is nice. It's an illusion of why he's really good. But now there's stuff out there that negates him. So that's something, for you to think about. Okay? The other thing that we can sort of say of making these monsters appear is we got our formation and we got our first draft. And then we're like, haha, here's all the meat that I have. And what we usually do is we're like, this is all the meat that I have, and it's a lot of good meat, and I don't want to share my meat with anyone, because then they'll have my meat and then I won't have any meat. That's not how it works. When you deal with ideas are not physical goods, which can naturally deplete. Ideas do not fall under the law of conservation. They don't. They're bound by beings that are in the law of conservation, but they're really not bound by the law of conservation. You can create ideas infinitely. They don't need an energy source other than people. Okay? They don't need power. They don't need calories. They don't need to eat. So sharing ideas is really good. Okay? Now, you might say, like, well, why am I sharing my ideas? The main reason that I am sharing my ideas is because I want other people to taste my meat and my cooking and say, is this good? does this taste good? Can I sell this? Or is this better left off as a home recipe? Well, if they come back and they taste it and they're like, man, this meat is disgusting. It is horrible. I don't see how any of this is going to work, and I think I'm blind. Then you might want to think again about your meat, okay? If you said, man, if they say, man, hey, you should bring this meat to the fall festival, then you might want to say, like, okay, the meat's good, but it's not stake my life on it good. Now, if someone says, I would slap my mama for that meat, guess what? You have a winner, okay? Then you start taking that team and you start putting it into the grinder. It's like making sausage. You take your meat, you put it into the grinder. And then as you grind it up, certain parts start to take a different shape. And you have a form factor that you're putting your meat into, that it has to fit. Okay? And so you're making your sausage and all this other stuff, and you have to say, all right, my meat needs to be able to taste and cook like this. So when I'm playing it is the process of cooking my sausage. Okay? That's how you have to look at it as. It's like, all right, so I'm going to put a sausage on the grill, and I got my coals, and I got my lighter fluid, I got my hickory, let's go, and you proceed to unveil the process of your team. Now, if you notice that, hey, I put up too much hickory underneath my sausage, and all my sausage exploded, or it was really dry, or it wasn't tasty, maybe you need to change how you play. Okay? Because the fire and the heat combustion symbolizes how we play. So if you're looking at your neighbor on the other end, he's cooking his steaks and sausage, and you're trying to prove that you're a better cook than him, then maybe you need to tamper with your fire a little bit. And this is really what it comes to demeanor. Outside of all my sausage jokes that you can make about my analogies. Okay. Pause it and get it out your system, all the sausage and meat jokes, okay? All right, pause. All right, we're back. All right, you got it out your system, now you can refocus. Okay. One of the biggest problems that I have found fundamentally within players in general, high level, low level, just in general, is the tech that they design is not necessarily above or below them. It does not fit how they think. And you can say some form of thinking is more advantageous than others in the game of heroclix. I won't debate that. Because I can say what time, what place, what lineup, and how much caffeine and lack of sleep did someone have. And how much stress is a person under. Then we can go into all that. And then we can start talking about mindsets. Because certain mindsets and certain analytical processes work better with no stress, no pressure, and casual atmosphere than they do under stress, under pressure, under lack of sleep, under high caffeine, under dehydration, under constipation. Because that happens. Yeah, that does happen. So there are a lot of elements that you have to function. And this is why I said all the way at the beginning is what casual play allows us to experiment and deal with other teams and quickly file them into our heads so that we don't spend time processing every little anomaly that comes across the board. Okay? Because if you spend time processing every little anomaly that comes across the board, how much of your brain power is used on trying to figure out what your opponent's next trick is instead of looking at the reality that's in front of you? So, sort of coming back together is what element in your play needs to be tweaked to work with the tech that you have. If after all your sausage making, you make awesome, tasty barrier tech. Your barrier tech is unstoppable, and you are hyper kamikaze aggro. I am sorry, sir. You have made meat that will make your stomach sick. And you'll think, oh, this is bad meat. I hate it. I'm throwing up all over the place. I feel awkward. I hate how the guy on the other side of the table is looking at me. I don't feel right. This isn't how the game's supposed to go. That's literally being mentally sick. I'm sorry, sir. You've created bad tech for you. Not bad tech for you. So that's something that a lot of people sort of dismiss at high level play. Because I'll hear people talking, and I'm a people watcher. Like, I'll interact with people. I like talking with people. It's great. I do sort of find it funny. I'm more of a coach. Like, even at a tournament, I was coaching people that I knew I probably had to face. But I was like, yeah, you just got to focus yourself. Just focus. But anyway, dang it, I almost lost my train of thought. But people will, when I listen to people, they will dismiss tech because they don't find it palatable and then lose to that tech. Or what will happen is they will see someone else lose to tech that socially in their sphere is seen as bad manners. Okay? So let's say not stalling, let's say barrier play is seen as bad form in your area. And then your best player from your area goes to a tournament and he comes back and he says, you know what? I knew all that high level play was trash because you know what they did? You know what I lost to in the end in top 8? I lost to a barrier team. You know what? Forget that guy. You know why? Because he doesn't know how to play heroclix. He has to resort to hyper cheese. He doesn't know how to play. He doesn't know how to play. He doesn't know how to face me like a man. No, you just lactose intolerant, son. You can't digest the cheese. That's really what's it. It was shown that that form of cheese is your weakness. Instead of adapting and manning up, a lot of people like to whine like a little baby. So you have to, again, if you hear somebody say, I lost this BS, okay, they just found their cheese that they're lactose intolerant to. So again, if you have tech and you create it and you can't stomach it, you can't play your tech. All right. The next thing is with, becoming a monster is maximize your strength, be aware of your weaknesses, and when you get to a certain point, start dealing with your weaknesses. I think I've said this on the show several times. My weakness is placement. And it kicked my butt at rock. So many times. So many times. Even in the last game, my butt got kicked by placement. Okay? But where do I compensate for that? Hypertech. I create tech that makes you want to kick me. That's what I do. That's part of the reason why I have this show, to share that stuff with you all. But I compensate by my lack of placement by study and by creating tech. That is, if you are creating computers, I have already mastered, light travel. I'm in a board cube coming to assimilate your planet. That's the level in which I play at in team construction when it comes to making tech. And so for a lot of people, they might say, like, I am the master of diversity. I know how to use every style and use it well and all this other stuff. Like, that's cool. You still lose to a full-on rush because you don't have a time to do 15 backflips and then, display your 9 Shaolin punch in which you have to gather, 15 tetragrams of chi to form through your fist. Okay? So again, every thought process, every play style has its weakness. Okay? And again, time, stress, personal relationships, relaxation in between rounds, rest, just mentally resting in between rounds, focus, clarity, friendship, communication, venue, body odor. All these things can affect how we think. Okay, so if you're able to have all those things be in your favor, you can be a monster at a tournament, and people will be like, man, I didn't see that dude coming. How did he go from being, a nobody to just rolling all of us? I don't know how. Maybe it's his tech. And they'll look at your tech and be like, he did some things that are a little different. Oh, okay, I see the nuance of what he did there. Oh, and I saw he could do these other things. That's the type of environment that you want to create, is that when you appear, they don't see you coming, and when you leave, everyone knows your name. And that's how you become a monster. It's not by being up there and everybody like, oh, Dan's coming, Alex coming, Edward's coming, freaking Cram Company's coming. No, that's everybody sees us coming and they're on guard. You all are the silent ninja army. When you roll up into a tournament, big, small, whatever, as long as it's important to you, and they're like, oh man, there goes that cat. He shows up every tournament. He goes 2-1. He's all right. I'm not too scared of him. Then all of a sudden, all that processing that you've done, all that 3 herbs that you've been just shaking on your pot, okay? And all that work that you put in, working with somebody else and taste testing and putting in some practice games, then all of a sudden you release the Kraken, and they don't know what hit them at all. They're like, it was the beast. Anyway, but yeah, again, I'm not dogging casual play as the devil, but understand the limitation of casual play, and also understand the benefits of casual play, because it allows you technical diversity, which you need to survive, to be aware of a predator and threats in the natural environment on instinct, so that you in turn can create something detrimental, powerful, poisonous, potent, or whatever else, to defeat your opponent in absolute ways that crushes any opposition. And that summarizes the whole podcast right there in the last 20 seconds. Shh, don't tell anybody. Don't put that in the comments. I need y'all to listen to my whole show. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for listening. Yeah, thanks for listening. You can follow me on Twitter at StartOverPod. It came from outer space. Made me some naan bread. And I put mango curry on top of it and had a good meal. Oh gosh, naan bread. It is so delicious. Oh gosh, my mom got some from the grocery store. I ate like the whole package except for like 2 pieces. And there's like 10 pieces in the package. It's so good. So good, naan bread. Anyway, you can also email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. If you wish to opine, let me know. What type of venue are you at? Are you at a casual venue? Are you at a hardcore venue? Do you wish you were in the wild, or do you wish you were that dog inside of the house? With a nice picket fence. Let me know. Because I'll be honest, not everybody blossoms in the environment that they're in. Sometimes it's the people, and sometimes it's the rules. But hey. Anyway, and last but not least, you can check out the blog, startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com. You will, at random times at the shimmering of the moon on the lake, you will find an elf, and the elf will mutter a magic word to let you know that there's a blog post. And that's sort of how it feels right now. I keep telling myself, I am going to get serious about writing blog posts. And then I just put stuff on the show. So anyway, that is mostly it. If you want to donate, the PayPal link is on the blog. Everything goes back towards the show and gifts for you all out there in the interwebs. All right. Thank you for listening. And remember, We all have to start over sometime.